It begins with a signal, a single tight-band emission caught by a fringe monitoring station in the Australian outback. It's buried deep in noise, wrapped in static, but unmistakably deliberate, not random, not natural. It cuts through the data stream like a coded whisper from deep space, and it's coming from 3 Atlas. For days, the world thought it was gone, slung behind the sun's shadow, outside observational range, lost to the void like every other interstellar anomaly before it. But now, it's back. And it's speaking, or more accurately, transmitting. If you're still watching, subscribe now. You crave more than answers. You seek what lies beyond. Subscribe now, and be part of the few who never stop searching. The James Webb Space Telescope, already trained on the quadrant in anticipation, locks on. Its instruments go blind for 3 seconds, not due to technical failure, but due to saturation. The signal overwhelms infrared sensors, saturates the spectrometers, and forces a temporary system reboot. And when the data finally stabilizes, it shows something no one expected: geometric pulse patterns. Not heat, not light, something in between. Energy arranged in Fibonacci intervals, ratios that mirror natural growth, fractal design, golden spirals, nature's mathematics. But these weren't natural, they were engineered to mimic nature. And that is the moment everything changes. Atlas is no longer just an anomaly. It's an intentional presence, a device, a messenger, or worse, a monitor. It didn't drift into our solar system. It navigated in. It plotted a course that exploited gravitational slingshots like a trained pilot. It accelerated at non-natural rates, adjusted velocity mid-course, and now, after a calculated blackout period behind the sun, it re-emerges with the one thing that confirms every fear: intelligence. The transmission isn't just mathematical, it's contextual. The pulses correlate to key Earth-based frequencies, our atomic constants, our hydrogen line, our radar emissions. It's not just broadcasting into space, it's responding. It knows us. It's referencing our own language of science. And in doing so, it's saying the one thing that no one wanted to hear: we hear you. And that message isn't being received in a vacuum. It's being logged, copied, and analyzed by a patchwork of military listening posts, civilian observatories, and space agency think tanks. Behind the scenes, emergency communication protocols are triggered, not to alert the public, but to coordinate silence. Information flow is locked down. Deep space datasets are restricted. Independent astronomers find their feeds throttled, because the truth is moving faster than the official story can contain it. What Webb sees next is worse. The signal isn't stationary, it's evolving. Every rotation of Atlas reveals a new modulation, subtle shifts in frequency, amplitude, and phase. It's not just repeating a message, it's progressing through a sequence. And on the 3rd full cycle, the pulse aligns with the transmission length of a prime number sequence: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, followed by a pause, and then a final burst, structured, measured. Like a code completing its introduction, it is, without question, the beginning of a language. The implications are immediate and devastating. 3 Atlas is not just a probe, it's a sentinel, a programmed watcher with intelligence baked into its very structure. Its silence wasn't absence, it was restraint. And now that it has chosen to speak, it does so with the weight of intention, because you don't cross the void of interstellar space to say hello. You cross it with purpose, and now that purpose is being revealed, one encoded pulse at a time. Even more disturbing is the timing. The signal reappears just days after a second object is confirmed: Echo 9, a smaller body following a mirrored path opposite Atlas. It doesn't transmit, it doesn't reflect much light, but its trajectory is locked in synchronicity, and that makes it the first true confirmation of a network. A pattern, not a one-off, a system, one that may span far beyond our solar system, one that may have been here before, watching. Now every government with a space program is on high alert. Secret contingency doctrines, long mocked as science fiction paranoia, are pulled from digital vaults and reactivated. Observation shifts to containment. Space Force divisions across 3 nations begin planning intercept missions, not to make contact, but to disable, not because they believe these objects pose immediate threats, but because not knowing is the greater danger. And then Atlas makes its final move. Just as Earth rotates into its best observational position, when all telescopes are ready, all sensors aligned, it vanishes. Not physically, not entirely. It's still there, but its signal drops. Its heat signature goes inert. Its reflectivity falls to near zero. It enters what can only be described as a stealth state, a full sensor blackout, despite being well within range. And that action tells you everything. This object is not here for communication. It is here for observation. And now that it has what it came for, it's fading back into silence. Not gone, but listening. But not before leaving one final signature. Buried within its last pulse, decoded over 72 hours by a multinational team of quantum linguists and pattern engineers, is a series of gravitational harmonic values. It references the Sun, Jupiter, the Moon, Earth, and then one more set of coordinates, a region of deep space, empty, uninhabited, light years from any star. The signal ends there. The implication is clear. That is where it came from, or where it was sent from, or where it is going next. No one can say, but the coordinates are logged, mapped, and quietly shared among allied intelligence agencies. Because whatever that place is, it now matters. And the biggest question remains, what did it want? That answer lies not in the signal itself, but in its design. Atlas didn't transmit sound or pictures. It used principles, mathematics, geometry, gravitational patterns, and that may be its message in full. Not a plea, not a warning, but a test to see if we could follow the logic, if we could recognize it, and if we could respond. But here's the truth. No one wants to admit, we don't know how. We understand the signal, but we can't replicate its style. We can't encode messages in quantum gravitational resonance. We don't have the tools, or the intellect, or maybe just not the perspective. Because Atlas wasn't trying to teach us, it was trying to measure us. And what it found, what it calculated from our radar, our emissions, our reactions, may have already been sent back. You feel it in the silence that follows. Not just the stillness of a deactivated probe, not just the vacuum of space between stars, but the quiet recognition that something has just ended, or maybe something has just begun. 3 Atlas is silent now. Its signal cut, its light gone. The object doesn't vanish, it withdraws, like a performer exiting the stage before the audience even realizes the play has begun. The James Webb Space Telescope remains locked on its last known position, but there's nothing left to see. Not heat, not reflection, not motion. The thing is there, and yet it no longer wants to be perceived. And then the leaks begin. Documents, snippets of coded transmissions, redacted telemetry logs, internal briefings marked compartmentalized access only. These aren't accidental drops, they're pressure valves. Intentional breaches by people on the inside who believe the public deserves to know the magnitude of what's been encountered. A phrase appears again and again in these leaks, not in scientific papers, in contingency memos, in closed-door sessions. Phase transition event. It's not a term from astronomy. It's a term from systems theory. Phase transition, a shift from one state of being to another, ice to water, order to chaos, silence to signal. It's used in climatology, in quantum mechanics, in war, and now according to these memos, it's being applied to the state of humanity. Because after 3 Atlas, we're not what we were. We've crossed something. Not a distance, not a threshold of knowledge. Something deeper, a psychological and existential event horizon, and there's no turning back. Because this wasn't just an encounter, it was an evaluation. The behavior of the object, the way it mirrored our frequencies, then muted them, the way it aligned with planetary orbits, but avoided detection until precisely the right time, the fact that it responded only after receiving enough of our radio chatter to make sense of us, it all points to the same conclusion. This thing didn't arrive randomly. It waited, it listened, it assessed, and now that it's gone dark, we're left wondering what judgment, if any, has been passed. Scientists, Those few still able to speak publicly try to shift the conversation toward natural explanations. They reference exotic cometary behavior, subsurface cryovolcanism, novel orbital interactions. But behind the scenes, astrophysicists and defense analysts are reviewing datasets that don't fit any known category. Metallic hydrogen readings, discrete energy spikes in the terahertz range, brief gravitational lensing events that imply mass redistribution inside the object. That's not a comet. That's not rock and ice. That's a machine, and it did something before it vanished. The most compelling theory now circulating behind classified walls, Atlas transmitted. Not to us, but through us. It used our electromagnetic spectrum as a relay. Our satellites, our radar dishes, our communication backbones. Not to speak to Earth, but to piggyback a signal off our systems. If that's true, we weren't just observers of an interstellar visitor. We were a node, a relay, a piece of the circuit. That's why it mirrored our signal bands. That's why it broadcast in Fibonacci sequences. It was using our own infrastructure to send something onward, something encoded in our understanding, something tailored to pass through us without our knowledge. And now another phrase is circulating in high-level discussions: unacknowledged forward presence. Borrowed from military doctrine, it usually describes assets placed in contested zones, assets that remain silent until activated. The idea that Atlas is part of a surveillance lattice. One that's been here long before we had the means to see it, long before we had the math to recognize its shape, maybe even before we knew how to look up. This leads to the more disturbing possibility. 3 Atlas wasn't sent to Earth. It was sent ahead of something else. A scout. Not in the conventional military sense, but as an ecological advance warning, a device that observes planetary systems, logs their technological emergence, monitors their behavior under observation, and then disappears, either to report or to clear the way. Not a probe of curiosity, a probe of preparation. And now people are asking the question no one wants to answer. What happens next? If Atlas was the first knock, will there be a second? A response? A follow-up? Or was this the response? And we just didn't understand the question. Then comes the reanalysis of older data. Radar returns from deep space anomalies in the 1980s. Fast-moving bodies that were never properly tracked. Photographic plates showing streaks with no orbital solutions. Ancient star charts with unexplained intrusions. What if this isn't the first time? What if we've been seen before, but we lack the means to recognize it? What if Atlas only became visible because we finally became interesting? A psychological operation begins in the background. Subtle, coordinated, not to conceal but to redirect. News outlets begin reporting heavily on exoplanet discoveries, on the search for microbial life, on theoretical models of alien civilizations that resemble ourselves, stories that reduce the scale, that shrink the possibility into manageable thought experiments, because the truth is too big, too raw, too vast. The truth is this: we've been contacted, not by a voice, not by a message, but by presence. And in the language of intelligence, presence is everything. You don't need to speak if your mere arrival says enough. You don't need to threaten if your technology surpasses comprehension. You don't need to ask for permission if you already know everything about your subject. And that's what haunts the minds of those in the know, that this wasn't a beginning. It was the middle of a long-observed process, that the decision about Earth, about humanity, has already been made, that we are being categorized, not as threats, not as allies, but as a data point. One more planetary species that reached the edge of the noise threshold, one more flicker of self-awareness in a galaxy filled with watchers. And still, Atlas remains out there, silent, cold, invisible, but not gone. It waits in the memory of our instruments, in the telemetry logs burned into black box recorders, in the frozen echoes of a signal that now lives on dozens of encrypted servers under 7 layers of clearance. And in that signal, researchers believe, is one final detail, a delay-coded sequence, triggered not by time, but by event, a pattern designed to unfold only once certain conditions are met, conditions that we are inching toward every day: increased AI development, quantum communication, space-time modulation, the slow unlocking of physics that will move us into the next domain of contact. Because maybe that was the test all along. Not if we'd see them, but if we'd be able to understand what they left behind. And now that Atlas is gone, Earth stands beneath a sky that feels forever changed. Not because a probe flew through it, but because it left us changed in its wake. Not with fire, not with war, but with knowing. Because once you know, once you truly know, there's no going back to the silence you once mistook for safety. You can't unknow the way it shifted course when we observed it. You can't forget the way its pulses matched the golden ratio. You can't unsee the moment it vanished behind the sun and reappeared 2 degrees off course, as if adjusting, as if reacting. And you certainly can't ignore what came after it sent that last transmission, one that wasn't made for the ear, or even for the eye, but for the mind. Not a message, but a mirror. It showed us who we are, and who we are to them. Observed, catalogued, understood. Across secure conference rooms, strategic command centers, and black-budget research hubs, a single debate now dominates every conversation. What was Atlas doing here? Was it measuring us? Testing our awareness? Confirming our capacity for perception? Because it didn't just pass through. 3 Atlas engaged, not in words, not in light, in mathematics, in timing, in presence. The type of engagement only possible between a civilization capable of constructing such a probe and another just advanced enough to realize it isn't a rock. And now, every decision is weighed against a single paralyzing fear. What if they've already decided what comes next? You see it in the way the major observatories have gone dark. Not offline, just quiet, redirected, repurposed, not for the public, for those with clearance, because when the truth is too big for headlines, it gets buried in silence. Silence that says more than any press release ever could. The Deep Space Network, recalibrated. SETI, diverted. The Vatican's observatory, holding private consultations with astrophysicists and theologians. Even CERN, yes CERN, has entered discussions with the European Space Agency about the implications of Atlas's signal harmonics. Because the transmission didn't just carry geometry, it carried constants. The same constants we see in particle physics, in quantum fields. It's as if Atlas knew exactly what we could understand, and stopped just short of what we couldn't. That fits the unsettling part. The restraint. It held back. Think about that. It didn't overwhelm us with information. It didn't blind us with radiation. It didn't dump knowledge. It released just enough to prove intent, to demonstrate superiority, and then it withdrew. That's not a mistake. That's posture. That's the behavior of something waiting for us to catch up. And it begs the real question. Are we being invited or warned? In back channel, diplomatic circles, new language is being drafted. Language for contact, not conflict. Terms like non-terrestrial origin with inferred intelligence and strategic observation device. They're trying to craft a vocabulary for something we were never prepared to name. Something that might not want a dialogue, but a demonstration. Maybe Atlas was never here to talk. Maybe it was here to watch how we would react, to observe if we panic, if we fire, if we hide the truth from our own species, and if so, what does our response say about us? Every major government has convened internal task forces. You won't hear about them. You won't see their reports, but their work is already reshaping our military strategy, our science funding, our long-range space planning. The next decade of space policy is no longer about exploration. It's about preparation. It's about the quiet understanding that something has changed. And not everyone sits handling it well. Some factions believe we've been marked, that Atlas's presence activated a cosmic countdown, that we've been scanned, weighed, and now categorized. Others insist it was a gift, an intellectual breadcrumb trail meant to lead us toward a greater cosmic community. And some, those truly terrified, believe this was a security audit, that Earth has been evaluated for threat potential, that our rapid militarization of space, our rising AI systems, and our disregard for planetary stability have triggered a kind of interstellar interest we were not meant to draw. Either way, The change is irreversible. NASA, ESA, CNSA, and a growing number of private aerospace firms have quietly shifted funding into new categories: planetary defense, deep space interception, signal encryption, off-world habitat construction. They're no longer just building rockets, they're building fallback plans. If contact happens, or if something more arrives, humanity needs options, safe zones, blind spots, redundancies. Because if Atlas was only the beginning, then we need to think in terms of contingency, not curiosity. Meanwhile, something strange is happening on Earth itself. Cultural shifts. Subtle, but measurable. Religious institutions are convening unprecedented interfaith councils, asking what divine purpose or challenge might be reflected in this encounter. Philosophers and ethicists are re-evaluating our assumptions about intelligence, consciousness, and existence. Scientists are breaking disciplines, collaborating across fields once kept rigidly separate. Linguists with cryptographers, astrophysicists with neurologists, artists with engineers. Because if Atlas taught us anything, it's that meaning doesn't come from language. It comes from pattern. And patterns are everywhere now. People are seeing them in everything. In the magnetic anomalies in the Arctic, in fluctuations in solar radiation, in the sudden increase in synchronized behavior among migratory species. Coincidence? Probably. But after Atlas, we don't dismiss anything as coincidence anymore. Even children are dreaming differently, drawing shapes no one taught them, repeating number sequences they've never heard. Perhaps it's nothing, or perhaps the signal was never meant to be decoded consciously. Perhaps it was meant to settle into our collective subconscious like a seed, one that blooms slowly. So what now? We wait. Not passively, not with folded hands, but with preparation, with resolve. Because the next encounter, if it comes, may not be subtle, it may not be silent, and it may not give us the luxury of interpretation. It may demand a response, and how we respond will define us, not to them but to ourselves. The truth is, we are no longer a pre-contact species. We are now a watched civilization. And in that awareness, everything changes. Ours look smaller. Our divisions feel pettier. Our arrogance feels hollow. Because if we are not alone, if we are being observed, then we must start acting like a civilization worth observing, with humility, with unity, with vision. That's what 3 Atlas leaves us with. Not fear, not certainty, but challenge. The challenge to rise. Not because we were told to, but because someone or something is watching to see if we can. And deep in the dark, beyond the orbit of Neptune, where even sunlight becomes a whisper, there's a final piece of telemetry, a glitch in the return signal. A ghost echo, one that wasn't there before.